Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a teacher for the Princeton Review, and today we're going to talk about the GMAT, the Graduate Management Admissions Test. Well, it's clear why you're here. You want to go to B school. You're lining up your schools, you've done your research, you're getting those glowing letters of recommendation in order, and now you're staring down the barrel of the GMAT. What do you do? Today we're going to be discussing a wide range of topics. First, we're going to talk about the structure of the GMAT and the design of the GMAT. Then we're going to show you some techniques that you can use on any section of the exam. Next, we'll talk about the individual sections, the quantitative reasoning, the verbal reasoning, and the analytical writing assessment. And finally, we'll discuss the role of the GMAT in the admissions process. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started.
The design of the GMAT. Now, the GMAT is what you call a psychometric test. Wow, that's an SAT word for you, and that's no accident, because like the SAT, the GMAT tests not how much you know about a subject, but how well you think. Well, all psychometric tests are based upon the granddaddy of all reasoning tests, which is the intelligence quotient, or the IQ test. Psychometric tests measure you or test you on very basic concepts, but ask them in a very weird way. So, for instance, on the GMAT, the types of concepts that you'll see that are testing you are going to be parts of speech, verb tenses, algebra, geometry, averages, to name some. Now, it's been a while, right? Well, remember that the GMAT is not designed with you in mind, but is designed to measure who the Graduate Management Admissions Council, or the GMAT, those guys, who they think you are. They know that you're a bright, college-educated, promising graduate student. And so they test you on basic concepts and tricks you into getting an F. What? Well, let's look really quickly at the distribution of GMAT scores. Well, recall that the GMAT is scored from a 200 to an 800, with the average score being about a 540. So all other things being equal, most GMAT test takers are scoring at about a 55%. So you're getting an F on basic junior high and high school material. How is this possible? Well, once again, remember that although the concepts are easy, the questions are asked in a very odd way to get you to mess up. So we at Princeton Review are here to show you what those tricks and traps are so that you can have the best strategy to avoid careless mistakes.
So let's talk about the structure of the GMAT. The GMAT consists of three sections. The first section is the analytical writing analysis. This consists of two essays, the analysis of an issue essay and the analysis of an argument essay. You have 30 minutes to write each. Those essays will be scored by two graders, and those scores will then be averaged to give you an overall score from 1 to 6. The next section is the quantitative section, what we at the Princeton Review call math, because it's math. This section is 75 minutes long and consists of 37 questions. In theory, scores range from 0 to 60, but in actuality, scores go from about 10 to about 50. The third and final section of the test is the verbal section. This also is 75 minutes long and consists of 41 questions. This also is theoretically scored from 0 to 60, but in reality, again, from about 10 to about 50. These last two sections, the quantitative and verbal, are then combined and converted into your 200 to 800 overall score. Note, the AWA is not part of your 200 to 800 score. It's a separate item. The last thing to consider about the structure of the test is that there are experimental questions which do not count towards your score. There are 9 experimental questions on the math section, 11 experimental questions on the verbal section. So since they don't count towards your score, how do you know which ones they are? You don't. They could be any section, any question. So that's the structure of the test.
All right, let's talk about some general strategies for the GMAT. The first thing you have to note about the test is that it's a CAT. No, not the Tweety and Sylvester kind of cat, but it's a computer adaptive test. So this means that unlike the SAT, you have no number 2 pencil and bubble and sheet. Rather, you're taking the test on a computer. What do I mean by this? Well, if you get a question correct, or as you get questions correct, the test gets harder. And as you get questions incorrect, the questions get easier. So to illustrate how this affects you as a test taker, let's go ahead and look at two test takers, candidate A and candidate B. And student A gets the first 3 questions correct. The next 2 questions are incorrect. Student B gets the first 2 questions incorrect and the next 3 questions correct. So they both got 3 questions correct and 2 questions incorrect. So we would assume that they would get the same score, right? Wrong. On the GMAT, what you have to know, and as well as all CATs, is that questions are worth less and less as the test proceeds. So the questions at the beginning are worth more than the questions at the end. So how does this affect you as a test taker? Well, what you want to do is devote the most amount of time and effort on the questions that mean the most at the beginning, so that you have the best chance of raising your score. Now, a lot of test takers make the mistake of trying to spend equal amounts of time on all the questions. But by doing this, you're not spending the most amount of time and attention on the questions that matter the most. Remember that pacing is very important on the GMAT. Slow down and score more on the questions that matter the most. Now, another factor that you can take advantage of in the GMAT is the fact that one of the answers has to be correct. What do I mean by this? Well, okay, pop quiz hotshot. What is the capital of Malawi? Any idea? Well, what if I were to give you some options? I have A, Paris, B, Milan, C, Cairo, D, Lilongwe, and E, New York City. Have a better clue? The answer is D, Lilongwe. Now, when you're looking at the GMAT test, or when you're looking at a GMAT question, you know that only one answer is right, but 4 answers are wrong. So they're easier to spot. Find them and eliminate them, and you're down to the correct answer. As Sherlock Holmes once said, once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. This is called process of elimination. Get rid of as many wrong answers as possible so that you can increase your accuracy. Finally, you have to know that on the GMAT, there's no skipping around. You're taking the test on a computer. You're not taking it with a pencil and paper. So you sometimes, if you don't know what the answer to a question is, you have to make a guess. So guess smart. Use process of elimination to get rid of as many wrong answers as possible. One final note is that the GMAT, it will penalize you for an unfinished section. So you have to make sure that even though you start slow, you want to finish strong. Make sure to give yourself enough time to finish the section. So let's recap really quickly. Pacing. You have to make sure to slow down and focus your attention on where it counts the most at the beginning. POE. Use process of elimination to get rid of as many wrong answers as possible. 3. Skipping is not allowed, so make sure to PO in a smart way and get rid of wrong answers. And finally, 4. Finish strong. You have to finish the sections or else GMAT will penalize you.
So let's talk about the second section of the exam, the quantitative section. This is the math. Now, the GMAT says that the math section measures your ability to problem solve, to understand and interpret graphic data. It tests your basic math skills. It tests your ability to reason quantitatively, among other things. And it sounds like an awful lot. But the most important thing to remember about this is that it's the most coachable section. What the GMAT really tests is your ability to take the GMAT. So even if you haven't solved for X since you were 13 years old, and maybe you've forgotten most of your basic math rules, you can still see significant score improvements in the math. So there's 2 kinds of question types on the math: problem solving and data sufficiency. Let's take a look at each of them in turn. Pablum Pictures produces 5 mindless action flicks per year, and Stultifying Studios produces 12 mindless action flicks every 3 years. If the 2 companies sign a 5-year contract to work together and continue to produce these cinematic masterpieces at their respective rates, how many gems will be produced over the course of the contract? Wow, looks tough. There's a lot going on. Imagine that you're taking the test and you're starting to run out of time and you begin to panic a little bit. A question like this comes up. Well, what do? Well, if you're normal, you do what I do when my computer freezes. I start randomly hitting keys and hoping that something will make the thing start again. When we panic in math, we do something very similar, and we start relying on simple manipulations of numbers rather than actually doing the problem. You know that you're looking for how many they make together, and you see that pablum makes 5 and stultifying makes 12, and could it be? Yes! Answer A says 17. How lucky for us! No luck involved. That's a trap. Do you honestly think that a question as complicated as this would have an answer that takes 2 seconds to get? No. Eliminate A. Okay. So how about B? Well, pablum makes 5 per year, so over 5 years that will be 25 movies. Well, wait a minute. That doesn't include stultifying, so this is what's called a partial answer. Eliminate B. How about C? Do you see a way to get 36 using simple manipulations? No, so keep it. How about D? Do you see a way to get 45? No, so keep it. How about E? No again, that's okay. Let's keep it. So now we have a 1 in 3 chance if we guess. This is a great example of how we can improve our odds if we eliminate trap answers, and thereby increase our accuracy. There's one other thing you need to know about the math section. The GMAT can take simple math concepts and make them harder by layering on steps. What we need to do then is to break the question apart into bite-sized pieces and work them one step at a time. So what we're going to do now is look at the basic math that we'll need in order to answer this question, and then walk through it step by step. So let's start by taking a look at how we deal with rates. When 2 people are working together, you're looking at a combined rate. For instance, when 2 cars are headed towards each other, why is it a more dangerous crash? I've got 1 car going 50 this way and 1 car going 50 this way. But when they crash, the impact is like 1 car going 100 miles an hour because you combine their rates. The basic formula for rates is that rate times time equals distance or amount of work. And again, when 2 people are working together, you add those rates together. So let's go back and take a look at this problem one more time. If Pablum Pictures produces 5 movies per year, we know that Stultifying Studios produces 12 movies every 3 years. We know that Stultifying produces 4 movies each year. So, with Pablum doing 5 and Stultifying doing 4, together they'll get 9 movies made every year. 9 movies a year for 5 years is going to be 45 movies. So the answer is D. Okay, so we've looked at combined rates. Now what do we do when we don't have all of the information we think necessary to solve the problem? Let's take a look.
Working at their individual rates, Marcus and Luttrell can build a certain brick house in 7.5 and 5 hours respectively. When they work together, they're paid $35 per hour. If they share their pay in proportion to the amount of work each does, then what is Marcus's hourly pay in dollars for the building of the house?
So there's a lot we don't know. How big is this house? How many bricks? We don't really know. So let's try making up a number. So what would be a good number here? Well, we want it to work well with the numbers that are in the question. So if Marcus can build the house in 7.5 hours, and Luttrell can build the house in 5 hours, we want to use a number that will be divisible by both 7.5 and 5. Let's try using 15. 15 is divisible by both 7.5 and 5, so it'll work well in this question. Marcus can lay 15 bricks in 7.5 hours, so he has a rate of 2 bricks per hour. Luttrell can lay 15 bricks in 5 hours, so he has a rate of 3 bricks per hour. So remember that when the rates are combined, we can add them together. Together, Marcus and Luttrell can lay 2 plus 3, that is 5, bricks per hour. Now, the question is asking what portion of the hourly pay Marcus receives. Since his pay is in proportion to the work that he does, for every hour of work that Marcus and Luttrell work together, Marcus lays 2 out of the 5 bricks. Thus, Marcus should get 2/5 of the pay. 2/5 of the $35 per hour is $14. The answer is D. Okay, that wasn't so bad. It looked a lot worse than it actually was. All we had to do was break the question apart into bite-sized pieces, take careful notes, and remember a few basic math concepts. So, we've seen how the GMAT can ask about simple math concepts in a confusing way. Now, let's take a look at how we can crack questions that test tricky concepts.
There are 3 orange balls and 7 white golf balls at the bottom of Tiger's bag. If 2 balls are chosen randomly, what is the probability that at least one will be white?
Wow! It's not even clear how to begin working on this question, which is exactly what the GMAT test writers are counting on.
Well, first of all, we have 7 white balls and 3 orange ones. Next, we are told that Tiger is drawing 2 balls. Let's figure out the ways to do that. He could have 2 white balls, an orange ball then a white ball, a white one then an orange, or 2 orange balls. The question asks us to figure out the probability of at least one white ball. So that means there are 3 different ways that could happen. On the other hand, there's only one way to get no white balls. So really, we only have 2 options, at least one white ball or no white balls. This means we only need to know one of the options and we can calculate the other. Which do you think is easier to find? Personally, I'd rather only have to find the odds of one thing happening than try to figure out any one of 3 different things happening. Because no white balls is the same as 2 orange balls, let's try to figure out the probability of 2 orange balls being drawn. The probability of the first ball being orange is 3 out of 10. But because we've already taken 1 ball out, there's only 9 left. And since the first ball that we drew was orange, there are only 2 orange balls left. So the probability of the second ball being orange is 2 out of 9. Because we're trying to find the probability of both balls being orange, we have to multiply these 2 fractions together. 3/10 times 2/9 is 6 over 90, which reduces to 1 over 15. Because we found the probability of both balls being orange is 1 over 15, we know that the probability of no balls being white is also 1 out of 15. Subtract that from 1 and we'll get the probability of at least one ball being white. So 1 minus 1 over 15 is 14 over 15. The answer is E.
There's something else we could have realized here. How many of Tiger's balls were white? Well, 7 out of 10, or 70%. That means that his chance of pulling a white ball on the first pull was 70%. And there's a chance he could have pulled a white ball on the second pull, which means that his overall chances of pulling at least one white ball have to be greater than 70%. Well, what does this mean? It means we can look at the answer choices and cross off all of those answer choices that are less than 70%. And how many of those are there? Let's take a look.
1/5 is way too small. We can definitely eliminate A. 7/15 is smaller than 50%, so definitely eliminate B. 8/15 is barely over 50%, so eliminate C. 23/30 is over 70%, so keep D. 14/15 is definitely over 70%, so keep E.
So, we just took a really hard question and broke it down into one where we now have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. Nice! This is what we call ballparking. So even if we don't know exactly what the answer is, if we know a range of values that it has to fall within, we can use POE to eliminate wrong answers. Now, even if we don't have time to do all of the math, we can definitely make a smart guess. Okay, so we've seen how we can take a question that asks about a complex concept and break it down into simple operations. Okay, so that was the problem solving. Now let's take a look at the data sufficiency. Data sufficiency questions make up about 40% of the math, so we should definitely get a handle on them. Now, the thing to remember about data sufficiency is you've probably never seen anything like it before. All data sufficiency questions have the same answer choices. So let's take a look at what those are.
Each of the data sufficiency problems consists of a question and 2 statements labeled 1 and 2 in which certain data are given. You have to decide whether the data given in the statements are sufficient to answer the question. Using the data given in the statements plus your knowledge of everyday facts, select one of the following answers. First, A. Statement 1 alone is sufficient, but Statement 2 alone is not sufficient to answer the question asked. B. Statement 2 alone is sufficient, but Statement 1 alone is not sufficient to answer the question asked. C. Both statements 1 and 2 together are sufficient to answer the question asked, but neither statement alone is sufficient. D. Each statement alone is sufficient to answer the question asked. E. Statements 1 and 2 together are not sufficient to answer the question asked, and additional data specific to the problem are needed.
So, those are the answer choices, and they're the same for every data sufficiency problem. But what does it really mean? Well, let's look at each of them in turn. Answer choice A means that statement 1 by itself is sufficient to answer the question, but statement 2, no good, not going to help. B means that statement 2 by itself is sufficient to answer the question, and statement 1's no good. C means that combined, the two statements together answer the question. D means that each distinct statement is sufficient to answer the question on its own, not together, on its own. And E, everything sucks. Forget it, you're not going to answer this question with these statements. Which leads to a pretty interesting implication for us. Say you look at statement 1 by itself and it's sufficient to answer the question. What are the possible answer choices? Only A or D. Now let's say you look at statement 1 and it's not sufficient to answer the question. What then are the possible answer choices? Only B, C, or E. And this split is what drives process of elimination on the data sufficiency. If you look at statement 1 by itself and it's sufficient, then you know that the only possible two answer choices are A and D. You can throw out B, C, and E completely. If you look at statement 1 by itself and it's not sufficient, B, C, or E are the possible answer choices. You can disregard and dump A and D. So this AD, BCE split is how we're going to work data sufficiency questions. Because by looking at statement 1 by itself, we can eliminate either 2 or 3 of the possible answer choices.
So what is the value of A? Statement 1 by itself gives us 7A plus 2B equals